From the very first moment, I need you to stay with me till the end, because only then will you understand the full story behind Dylan Mulvaney's Broadway performance that everyone is talking about. At first glance, it might seem like just another show, just another celebrity moment. But trust me, this performance was packed with so many twists and turns that it felt less like a stage act and more like a cultural event shaking the internet. Dylan Mulvaney, already known for her bold personality and unapologetic presence, stepped into Broadway with a performance that was unlike anything the audience expected. When the curtains rose, people thought they were about to witness a typical Broadway number. But within minutes, the atmosphere shifted. The crowd wasn't just watching a play, they were watching history unfold right in front of them. The energy, the style, the confidence, everything about Dylan's performance carried the kind of spark that makes people talk for weeks. What truly made it unforgettable was not just her voice or her stage presence, but the way she owned the narrative. Every single gesture seemed to challenge norms. Every word felt like a statement, and every pause kept the audience holding their breath. By the time the performance ended, some people were cheering uncontrollably, while others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. And that's where the controversy began. Was it art? Was it activism? Or was it simply Dylan being Dylan? Whatever the answer, one thing is undeniable. This performance has become a turning point in her career, and perhaps even in Broadway's own story. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the more shocking details come to light. If you thought the opening of Dylan Mulvaney's Broadway performance was powerful, wait until you hear about the middle act, because this is where the real shockwaves began. The first few minutes had already set the tone, but what followed pulled the entire audience into an emotional roller coaster that nobody saw coming. Viewers who came expecting a safe, predictable Broadway sequence were suddenly staring at a performance that challenged their expectations at every step. Dylan transitioned into a segment that blended humor, drama, and raw vulnerability. One moment, the audience was laughing at her witty delivery, and the very next, they were holding back tears as she exposed deeper themes about identity and belonging. The way she balanced lighthearted charm with heavy emotion was nothing short of magnetic. Every eye in the room stayed fixed on her, as if blinking for a second would mean missing something groundbreaking. But here's where the tension really built. Dylan didn't just perform for applause. She performed as if she was daring the audience to question themselves. The choice of dialogue, the costume shifts, and even the choreography carried symbolism. Some people whispered to each other, clearly caught off guard, while others leaned forward, completely captivated. By the midpoint, social media had already started buzzing. Audience members pulled out their phones, capturing moments that were instantly uploaded online. Within hours, Twitter threads and TikTok clips began flooding timelines with phrases like, "You have to see this to believe it." It was no longer just a Broadway crowd reacting. The whole internet was hooked. And here's the catch. This middle act wasn't even the climax. The biggest twist was yet to come, and when it finally arrived, it would leave both fans and critics struggling to put it into words. Now let's dive into the climax, the very moment that transformed Dylan Mulvaney's Broadway performance from impressive to unforgettable. This was the turning point, the scene where the audience collectively realized they were watching something that would be talked about for years. The build-up had been clever and calculated, but the final act delivered a twist that left everyone breathless. As the lights dimmed and the stage fell silent, Dylan stood alone in the spotlight. The sudden quietness was almost unnerving. Then, with a voice that carried both fragility and strength, she launched into a monologue so personal, so piercing, that the entire theater froze. It wasn't just acting. It felt like Dylan was speaking directly to every individual in the audience, forcing them to confront ideas they might have never questioned before. The tension rose higher with every word. Some in the crowd had tears running down their faces, while others sat in stunned disbelief. This wasn't just Broadway entertainment. This was a raw, unapologetic declaration of selfhood, artistry, and rebellion. And then came the final twist. Dylan broke away from the expected script, improvising lines that spoke directly to current debates and cultural issues. It was fearless, it was controversial, and it was exactly what made the performance legendary. The reaction was explosive. Half the audience jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering in admiration, while others hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with how far Dylan had pushed the boundaries. But that's what made it historic, the fact that it divided opinion yet commanded universal attention. When the curtain finally fell, the theater erupted. Some people rushed to post their instant reviews online, while others were simply too stunned to move. What Dylan accomplished that night wasn't just a performance. It was a moment etched into Broadway history. The night after Dylan Mulvaney's performance, the buzz didn't stop at the theater doors. It exploded across every platform imaginable. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with clips, reactions, and heated debates. Some hailed it as the boldest performance Broadway had seen in years, while others criticized it for being too much, accusing Dylan of turning art into activism. But here's the thing, whether you loved it or hated it, you couldn't ignore it. And that's exactly why it became the center of conversation everywhere. Celebrities began weighing in, too. Some praised Dylan for breaking barriers and redefining what Broadway can represent. Others took a more cautious stance, saying that while the performance was powerful, it might alienate traditional audiences. The divide only added more fuel to the fire, because suddenly, this wasn't just about a single show. It had become a cultural talking point about art, identity, and freedom of expression. News outlets quickly jumped on the story, with headlines that ranged from celebratory to critical. Phrases like "a new era for Broadway" and "Dylan Mulvaney shocks audiences" dominated entertainment sections. Even talk shows started replaying clips and inviting analysts to discuss what it all meant. The ripple effect was undeniable. Dylan's Broadway debut had outgrown the stage and entered mainstream culture. But while the media frenzy continued, Dylan herself stayed remarkably calm. In interviews, she smiled, spoke with grace, and left people guessing whether the controversy was part of her plan all along. Was it carefully calculated, or was it raw honesty spilling out in real time? That mystery only made her performance more legendary, because no one could truly pin down where the performance ended and Dylan's real personality began. As the dust begins to settle, one thing has become crystal clear. Dylan Mulvaney's Broadway performance wasn't just a single night of entertainment. It was the beginning of a conversation that refuses to die down. Even weeks later, discussions are still raging online, with people replaying clips, dissecting her words, and debating what it all means for the future of Broadway. And that's exactly why you had to watch until the very end, because only then do you realize this wasn't just about Dylan. It was about everyone who felt seen, challenged, or provoked by what she put on stage. For fans, the performance was groundbreaking. They describe it as liberating, bold, and necessary, a reminder that art is supposed to push boundaries and make people think. For critics, it was divisive, perhaps even reckless, but still impossible to dismiss. And for Broadway itself, it was a wake-up call. The industry, often accused of playing it safe, now has a new benchmark for risk, courage, and cultural relevance. The most fascinating twist, however, is how Dylan herself has handled the aftermath. Instead of feeding into the frenzy, she has let the performance speak for itself. That silence, that refusal to explain every choice, has only added to the mystique. People are left asking, was it strategy, was it authenticity, or was it both? And that's why this story doesn't end with a curtain falling. It lingers, echoing in conversations, in think pieces, and in the way audiences now look at Broadway. Dylan Mulvaney has cemented herself as not just a performer, but as a cultural disruptor. Whatever comes next, one thing is certain. This was the performance that changed everything, and the world will be waiting to see her next move.